I mentioned earlier that it is certainly my privilege to introduce my good friend and colleague, the Reverend Jamelin Pay Williamson. Jamelin is a graduate of Duke Seminary and is doing some really remarkable ministry, a good friend. We've enjoyed being together this weekend. Her husband, David, is senior pastor at Zionsville United Methodist Church, and over the years, they've always been one of these wonderful, young, although not quite as young, but one of our wonderful young clergy couples. I had mixed feelings, frankly, as a woman mentioning that, because I want you to know Jamelin in her own right, not that it's always David and Jamelin. This is Jamelin. I'm glad to introduce her to you, and we will be blessed this morning to hear from her. Welcome, Jamelin.
Thank you very much. I have to say, I'm having a lovely time, and I've already decided I think I just might start coming here every Sunday. Now, oh, well, that's nice. I haven't done the sermon yet, though, so let's not get too excited. So my husband is the senior pastor at Zionsville, as she mentioned, and he and I had served at St. Luke's United Methodist in Indianapolis for 8.5 years together. And so when he received the appointment to Zionsville, I had really been feeling called to continue our work that we had been doing for the last 15 years in Fondois, Haiti, full time. And so I requested from the bishop an appointment to what's called extension ministry, and have had a chance now to be able to do Zami Fondois, the name of our organization, full time, and we launched it officially September 1st, so I'm 16 days into this. Dave mentioned to me when I would no longer be required to show up for work on Sunday, that I would still have to show up for church every once in a while. So this is one of those times I get to be gone from Zionsville, and I'm really glad to be here with you this morning. So my husband and I met, as Cheryl mentioned, at Duke Divinity School. He was a teaching assistant for a class that I was taking on evangelism, ecumenism, and missions. So like really light and fluffy kind of stuff. And so he was my teaching assistant. He did not give me A's, and I think the best grade I got from him was a B+ on a paper, so I was not really interested in dating him. And then a couple months passed when he wasn't my teacher anymore, and I decided that it was too hard because he was really cute, and I would let go that he gave me the B's. But because we had that class together, we had a chance to really get to know each other. And around that time, after I had that class, I was taking a class from a man named Dr. Story. And Dave and I had both had him as a teacher. And Dr. Story was, go ahead and put that first slide up, if you will. There we go. All right. It'll help me get through the sermon. So Dr. Story had been a pastor in South Africa. He was the president of the South Africa Church of Councils, and he worked side by side with Desmond Tutu during the apartheid movement. So he came at local church from a completely different view than I had experienced with any of my other professors. And he challenged us in one class about understanding how the United States has an effect on the rest of the world. And I realized at the age of 25 that I didn't really understand what he meant. And he challenged us, if you don't really understand the effect that this country has on the rest of the world, before you become a pastor at a local church, you maybe need to leave the United States and have a better understanding of that. So at the age of 24, 25, I realized I didn't know what he was talking about, and I had been feeling called to do full-time missions. So Dave and I had been dating at this point for like 6 weeks, and I stopped by his house where he lived with some roommates on my way home and said, listen, I just need to let you know that I may want to leave the country after I graduate, and how do you feel about that? And he said, well, I think that would be fine. I've really kind of felt like God's calling me to that too. And I said, well, that's great. I'll see you later. And that was really our define the relationship conversation. Do you want to live in a third world country? Yes, me too. Okay, great. See you tomorrow. So from that, we got engaged, and soon after we got engaged, we started having some real conversations about, were you really serious? And he was. In the time that he and I had that conversation and we got engaged, I took a class called Healing in the Third World. And part of that class was having a better understanding of how there is medicinal healing and spiritual healing in third world countries. And part of it is we went to Haiti. We spent 10 days there. We went to 3 different communities, and one of the communities we went to was a little mountainous community called Fondois. And while I was in Fondois, I wasn't really sure about what this nudging feeling I was getting from God was about, but I knew that I would probably return to Fondois one way or the other. So Dave and I got engaged, and we went and talked with the professor who led that trip. And I just said to him, do you know anyone who might be interested in having a new couple come down and be able to work for 2 years? And he said, well, actually, my wife and my Sunday school class have started an organization called Family Health Ministries, and we are looking for a couple. We've been praying for a couple who might be willing to move to Fondois and live there. And so we became pretty excited about that. And before we left his office, he was introducing Dave and I to all of his colleagues as, hey, these are our new missionaries to Fondois, Haiti. And we hadn't said yes, no, maybe so. We walked outside and I looked at Dave and I said, well, I think we might be moving to Haiti. And he said, I think we may be. And I said, well, let's go get something to eat. So this is Fondois, and our initial community, our initial community in Fondois really centered around where we lived. One of the things we weren't prepared for is that we lived in community. We lived with about 6 Haitian nuns. We lived with 2 Cubans. We lived with a French volunteer, and then we also lived with a woman who was from Chicago. And so when we first got there, we had to get used to living in community. We took all of our meals together. The only common language we knew was Creole, and Dave and I did not speak Creole when we moved there. And so it took a while for us to get to know each other, but it's amazing what the power of Jenga can do for a community. We played a lot of Jenga together, and eventually we became pretty good friends. Well, soon after we got there, maybe about a month, Dave became pretty ill. And Dave was never sick in the United States, but he became pretty sick. And so we learned very quickly that if you have an opportunity to choose between 24-hour electricity and 24-hour water, you pick water every day of the week. Because Dave had some kind of stomach flu. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And we did not have running water this particular week. So that meant that I had to take a 5-gallon bucket and walk down these stairs and then back around the house and then down another little path where there was a spigot, and I could fill up the 5-gallon water gallon, or 5-gallon bucket, which I could only get halfway full because I was a weak American and who never carried 5-gallon buckets of water. Then I would have to walk up those stairs, and then you'd get to the top of the stairs, you'd take a quick right, and our room was kind of in there. So it's a month in. I barely know this guy I'm married to. I mean, we've been married 7 months, and I'm in a foreign country. I don't speak the language. I'm struggling with this sick husband. I don't know, if there's even a doctor anywhere around that I can take him with. And I'm having to walk up and down these stairs 5 or 6 times a day because I can only fill the bucket halfway. I was a mess. And so I get down to the bottom of to the top of those stairs one day. I've got my empty bucket, and out of nowhere comes Eugenio. And Eugenio is a Cuban veterinarian. And Eugenio stopped me, and we didn't speak the same language. I didn't speak Creole yet, and he just put his hand up. He took the bucket. He kind of pointed right here, and I stood, and I think I was probably crying because I cried every day for 6 months. And he went down, and he came back up the stairs with a full 5-gallon bucket. You know you're in a different space of life when that's the thing that really offers you hope in the world. And so he took the bucket, and all he said to me was, "Fami, Fami." And so I knew that we were going to be okay, because that was what it was like. The people really took care of each other. And for example, there was another woman named Jezila, and Jezila was a neighbor across the street, and you had to hand wash your clothes, and they do it like by rubbing your hands together sort of with the cloth underneath with the soap, and you get horrible blisters and calluses on your knuckles if you're not a Haitian woman who's been doing it since she was 2 years old. And so I constantly had scabby knuckles. It looked like I was a prize fighter or something. And one day she and I were talking, and she just kind of looked at my hands and then said, "So anyway, at this point I'm starting to speak a little more Creole," and she's explaining to me, "I see you're working more down at the school, and maybe it would be better if I washed your clothes because you don't have a whole lot of time." And I was like, no, I'm not gonna. You have 5 kids. I'm not giving you our clothes. It's fine. And this time, not so subtly, she stares right at my knuckles and says, "No, bring me your laundry." And so that's what it was like. We came to serve this community, but we found that we received so much more than we could have ever imagined. The people around us, they became our teachers, and we brought what we had, but they really were the ones who gave us abundantly. And it was this beautiful sharing that we were so blessed to experience for 2 years. And so we moved home in 2005 and kind of took groups back and forth, had a couple babies, did all that kind of thing. And then in 2010, I was in Fondois with a group, and the day that the earthquake happened. And so the steps that I had to walk down and go all the way around, you can see this is what happened. Where you see that desk up there, that's actually the second story. So the room Dave and I lived in, all that completely was flattened, gone. And what I realized when I was there was everyone was sleeping on the road. And the first night, the earthquake happened just before the sunset. And so we weren't really able to see all what had happened because it went pitch black very quickly. But throughout the night, for those of you who have not been involved in an earthquake, the hardest part of the earthquake is the aftershocks, because you just don't know what's going to happen next. So we are sleeping on the road. My team of 10, the Haitian neighbors around us, everyone who lived in that guest house, were all sleeping on the floor, on the ground, and every aftershock became a moment of prayer. And for me, I was still kind of shaking my fist up in the air like, why God is this happening? Why? The Haitians around me, every time an aftershock came, they were praying, "God, help us continue to be faithful. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for still being with us, even though this is happening." One prayer after another, one hymn after another. I think I heard Amazing Grace sung all night long practically. And in this moment where you would think people would say, "Why?" and they would turn their back on God for this horrible thing happening to them, there was trust and there was assurance that God was still with them in such a time. And in the months and the years that have followed, I have heard my Haitian friends say it 100, 1,000 times, that without God, we will fall. We would be destroyed Without God with us that day, we would not be here. But thanks be to God, we are still here. So there was no way for Dave and I to know when we first moved to Haiti all of the ways that God was connecting us to people there in Haiti. And then when we came home, all of the different ways that God connected us with church communities and people who have been able to go down and offer us support. But through the years, we have been able to do some work that we feel like has contributed to this community. And so I want to show you this slide. This is a picture. Oh, keep going. Here we go. Nope, back. Thank you. So this is a picture of a family on the left. This was the home they lived in. It was a family of 8, and they were living in that home. When our project manager sent this picture to me, I sent him a quick note back and said, "Is this their depot, which is like where you store your grains and everything that they're standing in front of?" And he said, "No, this is their house. This is where they live. When it rains, and the rainy season is 6 months out of the year, their family has to separate and go stay in different places because, as you can tell, it's not really good shelter from the Caribbean rain." The picture on the right is the house that we were able to build for them. And so as I reflect on this Mark II passage, I'm aware that it's not just a passage about helping your neighbor. It certainly is. You have the 4 friends that grabbed the mat and helped. But to me, I like to look at it also as how God calls us to commit to a process. So often we find ourselves in a position to help someone, and we do what we can, and then when we hit a roadblock, sometimes we're like, well, it's just not going to work out, and we kind of abandon the idea. But today, think about this passage not in terms of the paralytic. Don't think about the passage being about the paralytic's healing, because let's be honest, Jesus could have healed that paralytic even before they lowered the mat in front of him. Jesus could heal people all day long. Think about the process that went into helping the paralytic receive healing. So they had to go find a cot. Maybe it was one friend who had then also to find 3 other people that were willing to make this long journey and carry a corner, grab a corner of that mat, and be able to walk. Then they had to use problem-solving skills, because when they got to where Jesus was, there was the huge crowd. They're probably kind of scratching their head, trying to figure out how are we going to get him in. Then they look up and see the roof and think, well, that'll work. But of course, the roofs at that time wasn't just one layer. They were layers upon layers of mud and rock and hay and everything. So they had to go through each layer until finally they were able to lower the paralytic down in front of Jesus. And Jesus says, it's because of the faith of your friends that you are healed. It's because of the process that the friends were willing to commit to that healing occurred. And so that is really what Dave and I experienced when we lived in Haiti, and then the last 15 years that we have been working there. It goes back to Eugenio, who was willing to carry the bucket for me, even though we didn't have anything in common except that we both happened to be living in the same place. It was the experience we had when I had 10 Americans sleeping on a road after an earthquake, and my friend Jezila, who had been washing my clothes when I lived there, and whose father had had such a horrible injury that he had to have his leg amputated, and her husband had a broken leg, a broken arm, a broken clavicle, that she still boiled water so my friends and I would have something to drink without fear of getting sick. We saw again and again people who were grabbing a corner and supporting the community and supporting us. So now our hope is that this new organization we have started, Zami Fondwa, will help continue to help families find stability through housing, education, and economic development. And our hope with Zami Fondwa is that we'll be able to take families like this one from a dilapidated home where 8 people sleep inside a 8 by 10 room, where we'll be able to help that family find stability so that they can be able to work and have dreams and think about other opportunities in their life beyond just where are we going to sleep. Each family is required to do a number of things. One of the things they're required to do is to work 80 hours of sweat equity. And when I asked our director of operations, do you think that's going to be okay? He just gave me this weird look and said, of course, everyone wants to work. The problem is the work is not available. When I asked this family, who sleeps 8 in this room, what they wanted in a new home, their answer was, whatever you give us will be fine. Well, sure, because you sleep 8 people in a really tiny room. These visits that I did to the first 15 families that will receive homes in our program, our goal is to build 40 homes in 3 years. And these visits that I did just accelerated my urgency to bring people stable homes. When Dave and I moved to Fondois, we had no connections at all. Now we have an abundance of friends and people that we consider family. I tell people I live 1 foot on U.S. soil and 1 foot on Haiti soil. And over the last 15 years, we've been blessed to be able to build trust with people in Fondois. And so we have a director of operations. He's right in the middle, Luke Nair. The guy on the left is our director of engineering. He's designing all of our homes. And the guy on the right is our director of microcredit banking. And all 3 of these guys grew up in Fondois. They have committed to staying in Fondois. They were students of Dave when he taught English, and now they are running this organization. They're the boots on the ground for us while we are up here working tirelessly for them as well. They're the ones who are now carrying the mat. So if you're interested in getting involved in this, I'd love to talk to you about joining us for a trip. I have a trip going in October. And then I also have a trip going in January that I'm pretty sure I assigned Mike Marker to be the trip leader for. Mike grew up in this church, I believe, so if you don't know him, you should get to know him. But please make sure you talk to me. I'd love to share with you about what we do and how it can really be a transformative experience in your life. Or if you are not able to travel but you want to be a part of this ministry, we have pledge cards we'd love to give you so that you can help us carry the mat. This last picture is a sign of what was and what can be. To me, this is the picture that I focus on when I need a reminder that hope for a better tomorrow truly does create opportunities for transformation and new beginnings. This picture is a reminder of the paralytic on the mat and the healing that occurred because of friends. I pray that you will consider becoming a friend of Zami Fondois and that you will think about how God is calling you to help others find stability and hope and transformation in their lives. Because I guarantee you, when you commit to that process, you will be transformed as well. Amen.